Well, this is JD Miniear, and I'm with Clare Lopez, who is the Vice President for Research and Analysis at the Center for Security Policy. She's also a Senior Fellow at the London Center for Policy Research and a member of the Board of Advisors for the Canadian Mackenzie Institute. In 2016, she was named as Senator Ted Cruz's Presidential Campaign National Security Advisory Team. And in 2013, she served as a member of the Citizens Commission on Benghazi. She completed Marine Corps Officer Candidate School, OCS, in Quantico, Virginia, but before declining a military commission, she decided to join the CAA. And Clare, you're a great friend. When I'm working with the Concerted Commandos radio show, and you've been great to come to Indiana, which you're going to do again, and talk about national security. It's great talking with you.
Well, thank you, JD. I'm always glad to be with you again, and I'm really looking forward to the conference, too.
Yeah, that's going to be on a Saturday, all day, at the Indiana War Memorial, and it's on our campaign website, MiniearForCongress.com, under events, and we invite people to come. It's free, and we'll update you on who all the speakers are going to be. We're hoping to get some folks from the White House, maybe the Vice President's staff, and we'll just have to see. But this will be our third National Security Summit, and we bring in some of the best minds on national security and defense of this great land. But we're going to talk a little bit about who I hope is my opponent. I need to win a primary and focusing on that. But his name is Andre Carson, Indiana's Democrat, 7th District representative. He served a number of terms. His grandmother was she had cancer, and then he in a special election won out about 2008. 2009. But Clare, the Center for Security Policy has done some research into Mr. Carson's background, and he was one of, to start out, I've got some talking points, but he was one of 32 House members this past summer to sign an anti-Israel letter, which was drafted by pro-Hamas and pro-boycott, divestment, sanctions groups against Israel. So, 32 is hardly a majority up there, Clare, on the House of Representatives, but he stuck his nose at and thumbed it against Israel. I'll get your comments on that.
Yes, unfortunately, it doesn't come as a surprise that Andre Carson would lend his signature to such a document because he has long been associated with organizations known to be front groups for the Muslim Brotherhood, the Jihad organization founded in Egypt back in 1928, and which has now an extensive presence throughout the United States, and unfortunately within the body politic, if you will, and among at least two members of Congress. Representative Andre Carson is one of those with those kinds of associations, and Keith Ellison, representative from the state of Minnesota, is another.
Yeah, it's got Indianapolis and Minneapolis. It rhymes. But now he's on the House Intel Committee. He was put there by Nancy Pelosi. And he hired one of the Pakistani IT brothers, the Awan brothers, and I think our constituents and people paying attention to the news know that was pretty much bad news. That was an exposure, wouldn't you say, to our classified information?
Yes, for sure, JD. Well, the investigation into what exactly happened on Capitol Hill with these three brothers, Abid, Imran, and Jamal Awan, Pakistani brothers who worked as IT experts but with access to the computer networks up on Capitol Hill at the House of Representatives. That investigation is still ongoing, but from what we know already, there were compromises, to say the least, to those computer systems, and the brothers have been investigated because they are suspected of some very serious violations, including accessing House members' computer networks without their knowledge, and also stealing equipment from Congress. And one might add to that list that at least one of the brothers, Imran, was actually permitted, if you can possibly imagine this, to work remotely from Pakistan for months at a time with access to the House Intelligence Committee and other committee computer systems.
Well, people are thinking, the House Intel Committee, that's been really occupying our news cycles lately. Devin Nunes and Adam Schiff, and we're thinking about, the Trump dossier and all this stuff. But Center for Security Policy created your own dossier back in 2015 on Andre Carson. And can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, the Center put together the collection of information from open sources back in 2015 because it was at that time that House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi had decided to appoint Representative Andre Carson to the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, sometimes called the HPSI for its acronym. And that raised deep concerns from a national security perspective for us, again, in particular, because of Representative Carson's long history of associations with Muslim Brotherhood front groups, as well the fact that his campaign, as publicly available records show, his political campaign has received many thousands of dollars over the years in campaign donations from individuals openly associated with Muslim Brotherhood-linked organizations. And we thought that should be of concern, and so that is why we at the Center for Security Policy began to look into this.
Well, now, help our listeners, voters, know a little more about the Muslim Brotherhood. The left media would try to pan off the Muslim Brotherhood as be kind of an innocuous group of band of brothers kind of thing. But please detail some more information about them. Well,
the Muslim Brotherhood is a jihad organization that was established, like I said before, in Egypt in 1928 by a then university student named Hassan al-Banna and several of his fellow students and friends. It was formed in that year, 1928, specifically in response to the dismay that so many Muslims around the world felt at the abolishing 4 years earlier, that is in 1924, of the last caliphate, the Ottoman Empire Caliphate, abolished in 1924 in the wake of the Ottoman Empire's defeat in World War I and its reduction to a much smaller nation-state boundaries today we know as Turkey, and a former military officer, Turkish military officer by the name of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. Ataturk became his sort of nickname, meaning father of the Turks, took over what was left of Turkey and determined that it must modernize, and to modernize it must secularize. And so he, Kemal Ataturk, abolished the caliphate. This was appalling to the world's Muslim population, which had never been without a caliphate since the 7th century. They'd sometimes even had 2 or 3 at a time, but they'd never been without any, and now it had been abolished. So Hassan al-Banna forms the Muslim Brotherhood in 1928, and it is dedicated to the reestablishment of the caliphate on a global basis as an Islamic state, global Islamic state, under rule of Islamic law, that is Sharia, and that was going to be accomplished by Jihad. And to this day, the motto of the Muslim Brotherhood reflects those founding principles with the pledge that Allah is our objective, Muhammad is our guide, the Quran is our law, Jihad is our way, and dying in the way of Jihad, our highest aspiration. That remains the Brotherhood's pledge and motto to this day.
Well, Claire, you're a Middle East expert in geopolitics over there, and you mentioned Turkey, but I think you said you found some more information on Andre Carson, his association with Turkey, and the latest premier there, who's a hardliner. And go ahead and talk to our listeners about that.
Yes. So in the year 2016, we see Congressman Andre Carson speaking at a dinner and discussion event held at what's called the Diyanet Center of America. This is a Turkish government-owned facility, large, sprawling facility set on 16 acres in Lanham, Maryland, just north of Washington, D.C., where the Turkish government established an Islamic center, mosque, but also many facilities for conferences and training facilities and guest halls and many other buildings on the site. Now, the important thing about this is that the Center for Security Policy published a book in 2015 called Star-Spangled Sharia. It can be found at our website, www.centerforsecuritypolicy.org or securefreedom.org, as well as at Amazon Books online there. But this book, Star-Spangled Sharia, outlined the formation of a Muslim Brotherhood umbrella organization called the U.S. Council of Muslim Organizations, USCMO. And that was formed in 2014. Now, at that time, we began to see that the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood and this USCMO umbrella group was aligning itself with the Muslim Brotherhood government of Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Turkey and his AK party, AKP. So 2 years after the 2014 foundation formation of the USCMO, which, again, is an umbrella group of U.S. Muslim Brotherhood groups, so a group of groups of Muslim Brotherhood groups in America, led by CARE, Council on Islamic American Relations, ICNA is in there, Islamic Circle of North America, MAS, Muslim American Society is part of that, and many, many others. But there is a Turkish government representation within the USCMO, and we just began to see that emerging in 2015 as we published our book, Star-Spangled Sharia. Well, 1 year after that book comes out, the Diyanet Center, Diyanet, by the way, is the name of a cabinet department within the government of Turkey, an official cabinet department. It is the Cabinet Department of Religious Affairs for Turkey, and it is called Diyanet, and so sometimes we refer to this center up in Lanham, Maryland, for short, just as the Diyanet, because that's who owns it and runs that facility. Well, in 2016, in the summer of that year, President Erdogan came over from Turkey to join then-President, U.S. President Barack Obama at the Diyanet to officially inaugurate its opening. That's in the summer of 2016. Well, what we're talking about here is months before that. That is in March of 2016, before the facility was even open to the public. We see Congressman Andre Carson and others, like Representative Keith Ellison, too, given a special insider invitation to this dining and discussion event held at the Diyanet in March of 2016. And so that caught our attention with his photograph there on the Internet. And we realized then just what a close association there was among Representatives Andre Carson, Keith Ellison, the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood, which meets frequently at the Diyanet Center, and Turkey, the government of Turkey. Talk about meddling inside the United States and our political system. Here you've got the Muslim Brotherhood government of Turkey with the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood and two congressional representatives closely associated with both of them.
Well, and fast forward now, as the ISIS caliphate has been pretty much vanquished by President Donald Trump, but we have the Kurds and you're an expert on Middle Eastern geopolitical problems, but Turkey wants to vanquish them. I mean, there's a lot of friction. Turkey is a NATO ally, but we've had a lot of trouble with Turkey. Go ahead and talk about that, if you would, quickly.
Right. So I would call Turkey an erstwhile NATO ally. I don't see how it is possible any longer to consider them so. The president of Turkey, Erdogan, has recently publicly stated that the Republic of Turkey is just a continuation of the Ottomans. He is openly allied with Hamas, that is the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, against our key ally, number one ally in the Middle East, Israel. Erdogan's military, as you just said, JD, is currently attacking U.S. Kurdish allies in the Syrian battle space because it is afraid of Kurds forming a united geographic entity in the scraps of what's left of what used to be called Syria, and that entity, that geographic expanse where the Kurds live in the Middle East extends as well into parts of Turkey itself, as well as into Iran and the former Iraq. But just to talk about Turkey and its role again, we've got just this past month, in January 2018, Ismail Kahraman, who is Speaker for Turkey's National Assembly, openly called Turkey's military assault against those Syrian Kurdish allies of the United States, he called it jihad. He said, without jihad, there can be no progress. This is the Speaker of Turkey's National Assembly. More recently, just this month, February 2018, about a week ago, on Turkish TV, there was a threat once again from Erdogan against Cyprus and Greece. He says, quote, their courage persists only until they see our army, our ships, and our planes. Whatever Afrin is to us, Afrin is that Kurdish enclave that they're fighting over. Our rights in the Aegean and Cyprus are the same. Erdogan has said openly, we say at every opportunity that we have, Syria, Iraq, and other places in the geography in our hearts are no different than our own homeland. We're struggling, Erdogan said, so that a foreign flag won't be waved anywhere where Adhan is recited, that is the Islamic call to prayer from the mosques. Okay, this is what used to be a NATO ally. I would suggest to all of our listeners that Turkey is moving very quickly in a backwards direction towards becoming a neo-Ottoman jihad state instead.
Well, thank you for that analysis. And I'm going to pivot a little bit further east, and that was Andre Carson backing the Obama-Iran deal. We're going to talk about judgment again, but comment on that.
Sure. So the Iran deal that you're talking about, of course, is this nuclear deal called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. In fact, it's not really even a deal. Plan of action is simply a statement of what the various parties to this document, the P5+1, permanent 5 members of the UN Security Council, that would be France, Britain, United States, China, and Russia, +1 Germany, Iran, a party, and also, I guess you would include the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, monitoring agency for the United Nations for nuclear programs. And another point to make about this JCPOA concluded in July 2015 is that, and people don't know this, there is not one single signature by one single party or person on any one single page of the entire thing. Nobody signed it. That's what I'm saying. Nobody signed this thing. But in any case, it was purported to be a plan to limit Iran's nuclear weapons program. Well, no such thing, of course. It's a complete farce and a kabuki dance, because all it ever talks about are those parts of Iran's nuclear program that already have been revealed, by the way, not by Iran, as it's obligated to do as a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, but rather revealed by Iranian opposition members like the MEK, Mujahideen-e-Khalq, and National Council of Resistance of Iran, which maintain an extensive clandestine network of information informants inside of Iran. So Iran never fulfilled its obligations to come clean about its sites, and the JCPOA only includes those sites that have been revealed by others over time, but nothing about the clandestine, or I should say really the covert Iranian nuclear weapons program, which has been in existence since the Ayatollah Khomeini ordered his IRGC, that's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, to get the bomb, as it were, back in 1988. That marks 30 years, by the way, this year. 30 years that Iran has been working on a nuclear weapons program. We think they don't have nuclear warheads by now? What country takes 30 years to develop a warhead? Police.
With oil profits, no question about it.
And the help of all kinds of other nuclear powers, including China, North Korea, Russia, Pakistan, and probably a whole network of suppliers around the world.
Yes, and President Trump has called that Iran deal the worst deal ever concocted geopolitically in America. Talking more about Congressman Carson's just his judgment. He backed President Obama's refugee plan, which brought from the Middle East lots of Muslims who were not fully vetted, and we've seen that over the last few years play out. Get your comments on that.
This is a real serious problem, and something that we're very much hoping the President Trump administration is going to deal with in a comprehensive and a serious way with thoughts of U.S. American national security paramount tops in his thought process on it. So for a long time, the U.S. refugee and immigration policies have been in need of drastic overhaul and reform for reasons that President Trump himself has articulated. Among them, that those coming in under various programs are not sufficiently adequately vetted from a national security perspective. And when we're talking about individuals coming either from war-torn areas where terrorism is rampant, or such individuals who have perhaps fled such areas and are coming then to the United States from maybe places in Western Europe even, but their origins are in those places. So without proper vetting, without proper questioning about their allegiances, questioning about their allegiance to Islamic doctrine like Jihad, or their allegiance or their willingness to forsake allegiance to any other legal system, including Islamic law, Sharia, in order to pledge allegiance only to the constitutional law of the United States. Those things are not being done, have never been done. So lack of adequate vetting, and then of course chain migration, which allows many, many more to come in simply by reason of a relationship, a familial relationship to the original immigrant, without preference, as President Trump says, for what would serve the United States best in terms of educational level or professional qualifications or, particular potential to help the United States. And then finally, the diversity visa, as it's called, which is simply a lottery system for handing out visas willy-nilly in places where it's been deemed the representation among overall numbers of immigrants to the United States is somehow inadequate. So all of these areas are things that need to be addressed, and seriously. But the most important of all, in my opinion at least, is the vetting issue, and training enough State Department consular officials and others to be able to question competently intending immigrants about their beliefs, their allegiances in terms of legal systems, and so forth.
Well, we're going to talk about his judgment when it comes to our military, because under President Obama, Andre Carson was always voting with the far-left congressional wing that wanted to hollow out our military. I'll get your comments.
Well, he is a Democrat, and that's what Democrats of late, not always in the past history, but of late do. President Trump came into office, of course, on a pledge to restore our military. And indeed, the budget just recently passed by Congress does authorize significant additional funds to overcome really the years of neglect and, as you say, hollowing out, JD, of our military to where our capabilities are not just embarrassingly but dangerously eroded.
You know, always against defense spending, but there's one area Carson is very much for increasing when it comes to military, and that would be the social engineering.
And yes, this seems to be quite a fixation with some. The military is not the place for social engineering. The military is the place for people who are immediately and always ready, trained, and competent to go into deployment anywhere in the world as they are needed. And social engineering experiments do not fit with military readiness.
No, not if you have to take hormone treatments and surgeries and be laid up for months and months and months. And but it's ironic. Andre Carson, a Muslim congressman, has caucused with the LGBTQ group up there.
That is an odd situation, isn't it? Because, of course, as we know, one of the 7 major, as they call them, hudud, crimes are sexual crimes, illicit sex, of which homosexuality is considered within Islamic law to be to be illicit sexual activity. Under Islamic law, homosexuals are faced with the death penalty. And so when we see Islamic State throwing gays off of the tops of buildings, or the Iranian regime hanging gays from cranes in the middle of city town plazas, that's not just because those people woke up one morning and decided to be evil. They woke up and they decided to fulfill and to implement Islamic law. That's Sharia. So that Muslim representatives in Congress would take a position contrary to Islamic law must set up some sort of a bit of cognitive dissonance for them, one would think, some sort of internal conflict, one would think. Perhaps they've gotten a special dispensation for that. One doesn't know.
I know. Well, Andre Carson is on record saying he thinks the United States schools should be like Muslim madrasas. What say you?
Well, what is a Muslim madrasa? A madrasa is simply an Islamic school. In the United States, madrasas are often attached to Islamic centers, which include a mosque, maybe other facilities, even sport facilities, and a school, often K through 12. And these are schools where Muslim children, Muslim American children attend and are taught from the very first grade the doctrine of Islam that includes Jihad and Sharia. And how do we know this? We know this because the textbooks in English, this is America, that they use in these American madrasas, those textbooks, many of them are available online, again, at our handy Amazon.com. They're going to have to pay me a commission at some point here. And some of us actually buy those books just to take a look at what's in them, and sure enough, those textbooks for U.S. madrasas are teaching Jihad and Sharia from the first grade, age appropriate, of course, as the lessons progress. But should this be any kind of a model for American schools? Well, what do your listeners think? Me, off the top of my head, I would just say no.
We're winding down. It's been a great interview. So thankful, Claire, you could take some time out to discuss Andre Carson and his views. But recently in the news, the Daily Caller brought up the fact that Mr. Carson had been in meetings with Keith Ellison and I think a Democrat congressman with Louis Farrakhan. And we can talk a bit more about what kind of judgment is that, because we know Mr. Farrakhan is one whale of an anti-Semite. Get your last views on that.
Yeah, that is certainly very public. Louis Farrakhan, of course, the head of the Nation of Islam, which is more or less, perhaps less, aligned with doctrinal Islam as the Muslim Brotherhood observes it. But nevertheless, as you say, deeply anti-Semitic, and why any U.S. representative of a district where many people live would allow himself to be drawn into any kind of meeting or event with racist, anti-Semitic Nation of Islam representatives really deserves to be questioned. That is a real question that ought to be asked of the representatives who attended.
Well, Claire, we're wrapping up, but God bless you. It's so nice having you to just talk about some basic issues about Andre Carson, the person who I hope to be running against after the May primary. We'll see how that plays out. But we want people listening to know that you are going to be a special speaker along with others on national security at the Indy National Security Summit 2018, being hosted by Miniear for Congress Committee, and that is April 14th in Indianapolis at the Indiana War Memorial, and that's on our website, Miniear for Congress. But thank you so much. We always learn so much every time we get a chance to talk with you. God bless, and look forward to seeing you here in Indianapolis in April.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, JD, and see you soon.